Question 1. Quality control measures reveal that a specific mining process at a Coal India site is consistently exceeding permissible limits for particulate matter emissions, a direct violation of the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act, 1981, and the associated environmental clearance conditions. The mine manager is under pressure to meet quarterly production targets. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Immediately halt operations in the affected area, initiate a detailed investigation into the cause of the emissions, and formally report the noncompliance to the relevant environmental authorities as per regulatory requirements. Option B. Temporarily adjust operational parameters to mask the elevated emissions without a thorough investigation, and defer reporting until the next scheduled compliance audit. Option C. Instruct the quality control team to recalibrate their monitoring equipment to align with the observed emission levels, assuming the equipment is faulty. Option D. Continue operations at a reduced capacity while an internal team investigates the emissions, with a plan to report the issue to authorities only after a solution is identified. The correct answer is A. Immediately halt operations in the affected area, initiate a detailed investigation into the cause of the emissions, and formally report the noncompliance to the relevant environmental authorities as per regulatory requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate production targets and the long-term implications of environmental compliance. The discovery of noncompliance during a quality control check necessitates a swift and responsible decision that balances operational demands with legal and ethical obligations. The pressure to meet production quotas can create a temptation to overlook or downplay the issue, making careful judgment and adherence to established protocols paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately halting operations in the affected area and initiating a thorough investigation to identify the root cause of the noncompliance. This aligns with the principles of responsible mining operations and environmental stewardship, as mandated by Indian mining regulations and environmental protection laws. Prompt reporting to the relevant authorities, as required by law, demonstrates transparency and a commitment to rectifying the situation. This proactive stance minimizes potential environmental damage, avoids escalating penalties, and upholds the company's reputation and license to operate. It reflects best professional practice by prioritizing safety, environmental integrity, and legal compliance over short-term production gains. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves continuing operations while initiating an investigation, hoping to resolve the issue without disrupting production. This is professionally unacceptable, as it violates the principle of immediate cessation of activities that pose an environmental risk. Indian environmental laws and mining regulations typically require immediate action to prevent further pollution or damage. This approach risks exacerbating the environmental impact, leading to more severe penalties, and demonstrating a disregard for regulatory requirements. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to conceal the noncompliance, or to only report it after significant time has passed, perhaps after an external audit or inspection. This constitutes a serious ethical and regulatory failure. Indian environmental legislation mandates timely reporting of incidents and noncompliance. Concealment or delayed reporting can result in substantial fines, legal prosecution, and damage to the company's credibility. It undermines the trust between the company, regulatory bodies, and the public. A third incorrect approach is to address the noncompliance by making superficial adjustments without a proper root cause analysis. This fails to address the underlying problem, making it likely that the noncompliance will recur. Professional practice demands a comprehensive understanding and resolution of the issue to ensure sustainable compliance and prevent future incidents. This approach demonstrates a lack of diligence and commitment to genuine environmental protection. Professional reasoning. Professionals in the mining sector must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance, environmental protection, and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Immediate identification and assessment of noncompliance. 2. Strict adherence to reporting protocols and timelines. 3. Thorough investigation to determine root causes. 4. Implementation of corrective and preventive actions. 5. Continuous monitoring and review of compliance status. In situations of conflict between production and compliance, the latter must always take precedence, supported by clear internal policies and a culture of accountability. Question 2. The monitoring system demonstrates a discrepancy between the recorded operational hours of a critical haulage winch and its last scheduled statutory inspection date, as per the Coal Mines Regulations, 1957. Which of the following actions best aligns with the regulatory framework for ensuring mine safety and operational integrity? Option A. Assume the winch is functioning adequately as no operational failures have been reported, and schedule the next inspection as per the standard calendar, disregarding the operational hours discrepancy. Option B. Initiate an immediate thorough inspection of the winch, review all past maintenance logs for the past year, and document any findings or corrective actions taken in the statutory inspection register. Option C. Temporarily suspend the operation of the winch until a comprehensive overhaul is completed, even if no immediate safety concerns are evident from the monitoring system. Option D. Request a detailed technical report from the equipment manufacturer on the winch's current condition, bypassing the immediate statutory inspection requirement. The correct answer is B. Initiate an immediate thorough inspection of the winch, review all past maintenance logs for the past year, and document any findings or corrective actions taken in the statutory inspection register. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a potential lapse in the adherence to safety protocols, specifically concerning the regular inspection and maintenance of critical mining equipment. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of the Coal Mines Regulations, 1957, and the Mines Act, 1952, to identify the precise nature of the noncompliance and its potential ramifications. The immediate need is to ensure the safety of personnel and prevent potential accidents, which are paramount under Indian mining law. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the maintenance logs against the mandated inspection frequencies stipulated in the Coal Mines Regulations, 1957. This regulation, specifically provisions related to the upkeep of machinery and safety devices, mandates regular checks to ensure operational integrity. By cross-referencing the system's data with these legal requirements, one can accurately pinpoint any deviations. This approach represents best professional practice because it is directly aligned with the legal obligations to maintain a safe working environment, thereby preventing potential hazards and ensuring compliance with statutory duties. It prioritizes proactive risk management over reactive responses to incidents. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the discrepancy as a minor administrative oversight without verifying its impact on equipment safety. This fails to acknowledge the regulatory framework that treats equipment maintenance as a critical safety measure, not merely an operational detail. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the equipment's perceived current functionality without documented evidence of inspection. This bypasses the legal requirement for systematic, recorded checks, leaving room for hidden defects that could lead to catastrophic failure. A third incorrect approach would be to delay corrective action pending further, non-essential investigations, which contravenes the principle of immediate action when safety is potentially compromised. As emphasized by the Mines Act, 1952, in its overarching mandate for mine safety, professionals should adopt a decision-making process that begins with identifying potential safety concerns flagged by monitoring systems. This should be followed by an immediate cross-reference with the relevant sections of the Coal Mines Regulations, 1957, and the Mines Act, 1952, to ascertain the legal requirements. The next step is to gather all available data, including maintenance logs and inspection reports, to assess the extent of compliance. Based on this assessment, a determination of the risk level should be made, and immediate corrective actions, including necessary repairs or enhanced inspection schedules, should be implemented. Documentation of all steps taken is crucial for accountability and future audits. Question 3. Stakeholder feedback indicates a growing concern regarding the environmental impact of new mining ventures. A mine manager is considering initiating a new extraction project that is expected to significantly boost production. However, the project involves operating in an area with a sensitive ecosystem. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance and responsible environmental stewardship? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment to identify and mitigate potential risks before commencing operations. Option B. Proceed with the new mining activity, relying on the company's extensive experience in similar environments, and address any environmental issues that arise later. Option C. Undertake a brief, informal review of potential environmental concerns, focusing only on the most obvious issues. To expedite the project's start, Option D. Delay the environmental assessment until after mining operations have begun, prioritizing immediate production targets over preemptive environmental evaluation. Correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment to identify and mitigate potential risks before commencing operations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. The pressure to meet production targets can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential environmental risks. A manager must exercise sound judgment to ensure that decisions are not solely driven by short-term gains, but also by adherence to the Coal Mines, Conservation and Development Act, 1974, and associated environmental regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing a thorough environmental impact assessment before proceeding with any new mining activity. This aligns directly with the principles embedded in the Coal Mines, Conservation and Development Act, 1974, which mandates responsible resource extraction and environmental protection. Conducting a comprehensive assessment ensures that potential adverse effects on land, water, air, and biodiversity are identified, evaluated, and mitigated according to established environmental standards and guidelines. This proactive stance is ethically sound and legally compliant, safeguarding both the company's reputation and the environment. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the new mining activity without a formal environmental impact assessment, relying solely on past experience. This is a significant regulatory failure, as it bypasses a mandatory step stipulated by environmental laws. It demonstrates a disregard for potential unforeseen environmental consequences and a lack of due diligence, which can lead to severe penalties, legal challenges, and reputational damage. Ethically, it prioritizes expediency over environmental stewardship. Another incorrect approach is to conduct a superficial assessment that only addresses obvious issues, ignoring potential long-term or indirect impacts. This is also a regulatory failure because environmental impact assessments are intended to be comprehensive. Such an approach is ethically questionable, as it represents a deliberate attempt to circumvent the spirit of the law, potentially leading to hidden environmental problems that could surface later, causing greater harm and requiring more extensive remediation. A third incorrect approach is to postpone the environmental assessment until after mining operations have commenced, citing urgent production demands. This is a clear violation of regulatory frameworks that typically require such assessments to be completed prior to commencement. It is an ethically irresponsible decision that places immediate economic pressures above environmental safety and legal obligations, exposing the company to substantial risks. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should adopt a systematic decision-making process. First, identify all relevant legal and regulatory requirements, particularly those pertaining to environmental impact assessments for mining operations under Indian law. Second, assess the potential risks and benefits associated with each course of action, considering both short-term and long-term implications. Third, consult with environmental experts and legal counsel to ensure a thorough understanding of compliance obligations and potential liabilities. Fourth, prioritize decisions that uphold regulatory compliance and ethical standards, even if they involve initial delays or increased costs. Finally, document all decisions and the rationale behind them to ensure transparency and accountability. Question 4. Assessment of a proposed new method for disposing of coal mining waste at a large open-cast mine in India, which involves direct dumping into a nearby ravine. The mine management is concerned about the cost and time associated with traditional, approved methods and believes the ravine offers a convenient and cost-effective solution. However, preliminary observations suggest the ravine is a seasonal watercourse that eventually drains into a river used by local communities downstream. Which of the following actions best represents the professional and regulatory obligation of the mine's environmental and safety officers? Option A. Implement the disposal method in the ravine, but only during dry seasons, and document the decision internally as a cost-saving measure. Option B. Seek informal approval from local village elders for the disposal, assuming their consent negates the need for formal regulatory clearances. Option C. Proceed with the disposal in the ravine, but instruct workers to monitor water flow and report any significant changes to the downstream river. Option D. Immediately halt the proposed disposal method and initiate a comprehensive environmental impact assessment, consulting with relevant environmental authorities and legal counsel to determine compliant and sustainable waste management practices. The correct answer is D. Immediately halt the proposed disposal method and initiate a comprehensive environmental impact assessment, consulting with relevant environmental authorities and legal counsel to determine compliant and sustainable waste management practices. Explanation: the scenario presents a common challenge in the mining industry, balancing operational efficiency with environmental stewardship and regulatory compliance. Specifically, it tests understanding of the Coal Mines Safety and Health Act, 1977, India, and its associated regulations concerning waste disposal and environmental impact assessments. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying these regulations to a practical situation where immediate operational needs might conflict with long-term environmental obligations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions are not only economically viable, but also legally sound and ethically responsible, preventing potential harm to the environment and community, and avoiding severe penalties. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the proposed waste disposal method against the specific provisions of the Coal Mines Safety and Health Act, 1977, and relevant environmental protection laws in India. This includes understanding the requirements for environmental impact assessments, obtaining necessary permits, and adhering to guidelines for safe and environmentally sound disposal of mining waste. Best professional practice dictates a proactive and compliant stance, prioritizing adherence to the law and minimizing environmental footprint. This approach ensures long-term sustainability, protects the company's reputation, and avoids legal repercussions. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the disposal without a proper environmental impact assessment or necessary clearances, assuming that existing infrastructure is sufficient. This directly violates the spirit and letter of the Coal Mines Safety and Health Act, 1977, which mandates careful planning and assessment for any activity that could impact the environment. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed of disposal over environmental safety, perhaps by using a method not explicitly approved or by disregarding potential downstream effects on local water bodies or ecosystems. This demonstrates a failure to uphold ethical responsibilities and a disregard for regulatory mandates designed to protect public health and the environment. A third incorrect approach might be to rely on outdated or informal practices that are no longer compliant with current legislation, showing a lack of diligence in staying updated with legal requirements. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the applicable legal and regulatory framework. This involves identifying all relevant statutes, rules, and guidelines. Next, they should gather all necessary factual information pertaining to the situation. The core of the decision-making process involves evaluating the proposed action against the identified regulatory requirements, considering potential risks and impacts. Seeking expert advice, particularly from environmental and legal professionals, is crucial when uncertainty exists. Finally, the decision should be documented, with clear justification based on regulatory compliance and best professional judgment. Question 5. Comparative studies suggest that in the context of Indian coal mining operations, balancing production targets with environmental sustainability is a critical challenge. Considering the regulatory framework governing Coal India, which approach best exemplifies professional best practice when faced with pressure to accelerate extraction in a sensitive ecological zone? Option A. Negotiate with local authorities to temporarily relax environmental compliance norms, citing the economic benefits of increased coal production, and commit to addressing environmental concerns in the long term. Option B. Halt operations in the sensitive zone until a comprehensive environmental impact assessment (IA) is completed. All necessary regulatory approvals are secured from the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change (MOEFC), and a detailed, scientifically validated environmental management plan (EMP) is in place and approved. Option C. Focus solely on maximizing output by utilizing existing infrastructure and deferring any new environmental mitigation investments, arguing that such investments would impede immediate production goals. Option D. Proceed with accelerated extraction after conducting a preliminary environmental review and implementing basic dust suppression measures, assuming that detailed environmental clearances can be obtained retrospectively. Correct answer is D. Proceed with accelerated extraction after conducting a preliminary environmental review and implementing basic dust suppression measures, assuming that detailed environmental clearances can be obtained retrospectively. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term implications of environmental stewardship and regulatory compliance within the Indian coal mining sector. The pressure to meet production targets can create a conflict of interest, requiring careful judgment to ensure that decisions do not compromise environmental regulations or ethical mining practices. The specific context of Coal India, a public sector undertaking, adds a layer of accountability to government policies and public perception. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves prioritizing adherence to the Coal Mines, Conservation and Development Act, 1974, and the associated rules and regulations, alongside the Mines Act, 1952, and environmental protection laws. This approach represents best professional practice because it aligns with the legal framework designed to ensure sustainable mining, minimize environmental damage, and protect worker safety. Specifically, it necessitates a thorough environmental impact assessment (IA) and the implementation of mitigation measures as mandated by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change (MoF) guidelines. This proactive stance ensures that operational decisions are informed by environmental considerations, thereby preventing potential legal repercussions, fines, and reputational damage, while also contributing to the long-term viability of mining operations and the surrounding ecosystem. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that prioritizes immediate production targets over mandatory environmental clearances and impact assessments is a direct violation of the Coal Mines, Conservation and Development Act, 1974, and the Environment Protection Act, 1986. This constitutes a significant regulatory failure, exposing the company to severe penalties, including operational shutdowns and substantial fines. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for environmental responsibility and sustainable development principles. Another incorrect approach would be to adopt a superficial or tokenistic approach to environmental mitigation, such as implementing measures that do not adequately address the identified environmental risks or are not based on scientific assessments. This would be a failure to comply with the spirit and intent of environmental regulations, potentially leading to long-term ecological damage and legal challenges. It also reflects a lack of professional integrity in fulfilling environmental obligations. Furthermore, an approach that bypasses established consultation processes with local communities and regulatory bodies regarding environmental management plans would be ethically unsound and potentially illegal. Such actions undermine transparency and stakeholder engagement, which are crucial for responsible mining operations and can lead to social unrest and legal disputes. Professional reasoning. Professionals in the Indian coal mining sector must adopt a decision-making framework that integrates legal compliance, environmental stewardship, and operational efficiency. This involves 1. Understanding and strictly adhering to all relevant Indian legislation, including the Coal Mines, Conservation and Development Act, 1974, the Mines Act, 1952, and environmental protection laws. 2. Conducting comprehensive environmental impact assessments, IA, and social impact assessments, JE, before commencing or modifying operations. 3. Developing and diligently implementing robust environmental management plans, EMP, that include specific mitigation and monitoring strategies. 4. Engaging in transparent and continuous consultation with regulatory bodies, local communities, and other stakeholders. 5. Fostering a culture of environmental responsibility and ethical conduct throughout the organization, where compliance is seen as integral to operational success, not an impediment. 6. Regularly reviewing and updating practices in line with evolving environmental standards and best practices. Question 6. The evaluation methodology shows that a close acquaintance of yours is a candidate for a position within Coal India for which you are part of the hiring committee. You have received information that suggests this acquaintance may not meet the minimum qualifications for the role, but you also know that there is pressure to fill the position quickly. You are aware that your involvement in the final selection could be perceived as biased, even if you act impartially. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Proceed with the evaluation as usual, assuming your professional integrity will prevent any bias, and do not disclose the acquaintance to your colleagues on the committee. Option B. Advocate for your acquaintance's candidacy to your committee members, highlighting their perceived strengths while downplaying any potential weaknesses to ensure they are considered favorably. Option C. Discreetly provide your acquaintance with insights into the selection criteria and interview process to help them better prepare, while still participating in the evaluation. Option D. Immediately report the potential conflict of interest to your superior and recuse yourself from any further involvement in the evaluation and selection process for this candidate, ensuring the process remains impartial. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the potential conflict of interest to your superior and recuse yourself from any further involvement in the evaluation and selection process for this candidate, ensuring the process remains impartial. Explanation. This scenario presents a classic ethical dilemma in a professional setting, specifically within the context of Coal India's operations. The challenge lies in balancing personal gain with professional integrity and adherence to company policy and regulatory guidelines. The pressure to meet targets, coupled with the potential for personal benefit, can cloud judgment. The correct approach involves prioritizing ethical conduct and adherence to established procedures over personal advantage. This aligns with Coal India's commitment to fair hiring practices and the broader regulatory framework governing employment and corporate conduct in India. Specifically, it upholds principles of transparency, fairness, and non-discrimination, which are paramount in recruitment. By reporting the situation and recusing oneself, the individual demonstrates integrity and avoids any perception of impropriety, thereby safeguarding both their own reputation and that of Coal India. This action is consistent with the ethical codes expected of employees in public sector undertakings and adheres to principles of good governance. An incorrect approach of accepting the offer and remaining silent would constitute a serious ethical breach. It implies complicity in a potentially unfair hiring process, undermining the meritocratic principles that should govern recruitment. This could lead to legal repercussions and severe damage to the individual's career and Coal India's reputation. Furthermore, it violates the trust placed in employees to act with integrity. Another incorrect approach, that of subtly influencing the selection process to favor the acquaintance, is equally unethical and potentially illegal. This constitutes a conflict of interest and an abuse of power. It directly contravenes principles of fair competition and equal opportunity, and could lead to disciplinary action, including termination and legal penalties. Such actions erode the credibility of the hiring process and the organization. Finally, an incorrect approach of outright rejecting the acquaintance without proper justification or reporting the conflict of interest could also be problematic. While it avoids direct complicity, it fails to address the underlying ethical issue and the potential for future conflicts. A professional approach requires proactive management of such situations, which includes transparent reporting and seeking guidance. A professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Recognizing the potential conflict of interest. 2. Understanding the relevant company policies and ethical guidelines. 3. Prioritizing integrity and fairness above personal relationships or potential gains. 4. Proactively reporting the conflict to the appropriate authority. 5. Recusing oneself from any decision-making process related to the acquaintance. 6. Seeking guidance on how to proceed to ensure a fair and transparent outcome. Question 7. To address the challenge of a critical equipment malfunction that has halted production in a key section of the mine, and with pressure mounting from management to resume operations swiftly to meet output targets, what is the most appropriate course of action, considering the absolute priority of safety regulations as per the Mines Act, 1952? Option A. Proceed with a partial resumption of operations while a very brief, informal check of the critical equipment is performed by the maintenance team. Option B. Authorize the immediate resumption of operations in the affected section, with a promise to conduct a safety audit at a later, more convenient time. Option C. Delegate the decision to resume operations to the site supervisor, who is under immense pressure to meet production quotas. Option D. Insist on completing the scheduled safety audit of the affected section, before any attempt to resume operations, even if it causes further delays. The correct answer is D. Insist on completing the scheduled safety audit of the affected section before any attempt to resume operations, even if it causes further delays. Explanation. The scenario presents a common implementation challenge in a large organization like Coal India, where adherence to established safety protocols is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term imperative of maintaining a robust safety culture, as mandated by the Mines Act, 1952, and associated regulations. A hasty decision to bypass a safety check, even with the promise of improved output, risks not only immediate accidents, but also erosion of compliance and potential legal repercussions. The correct approach, which involves prioritizing the safety audit before resuming operations, aligns with the fundamental principles of the Mines Act, 1952. This act, along with regulations like the Coal Mines Regulations, 1957, places a strict onus on mine management to ensure the safety and health of all persons employed. A mandatory safety audit is a critical mechanism for identifying and mitigating hazards, thereby preventing accidents and ensuring compliance. By insisting on the audit, the professional upholds their duty of care and demonstrates a commitment to a proactive safety culture, which is a cornerstone of responsible mining operations. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate production over the safety audit fails to recognize the absolute priority of safety mandated by law. This could lead to serious accidents, injuries, or fatalities, resulting in severe penalties under the Mines Act, including fines and imprisonment for responsible individuals. Furthermore, it undermines the integrity of the safety management system and fosters a culture where shortcuts are acceptable, which is ethically reprehensible and legally indefensible. Another incorrect approach might involve attempting to conduct a superficial or incomplete audit to expedite operations. This is also a regulatory failure, as it circumvents the spirit and intent of the law, which requires thorough and effective safety assessments. Such an action would be considered a deliberate act of noncompliance and could still lead to significant legal and ethical consequences if an incident occurs. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured decision-making process. First, they must clearly identify the conflicting priorities and the relevant legal and regulatory framework. In this case, the Mines Act, 1952, and related regulations. Second, they should assess the potential risks associated with each course of action, considering both immediate and long-term consequences. Third, they must consult with relevant stakeholders, including safety officers and management, to ensure a comprehensive understanding of the situation and to explore all viable options. Finally, the decision must be grounded in a commitment to legal compliance and ethical responsibility, prioritizing the safety and well-being of personnel above all else. Question 8. The assessment process reveals that a junior mining engineer has observed a slight deviation in the air quality readings from the standard permissible limits in a particular section of the mine. Their immediate supervisor suggests that this deviation is minor and has been within acceptable ranges in the past, urging the engineer to continue operations to meet production targets. The engineer is aware of the Coal Mines Regulations, 1957, which specify strict limits for airborne contaminants. Which of the following actions best reflects the professional and regulatory obligations of the junior mining engineer in this situation? Option A. Immediately halt operations in the affected section and report the deviation to the Senior Safety Officer and the Directorate General of Mine Safety, DGMS, for assessment and guidance, while ensuring all workers are safely evacuated from the area. Option B. Proceed with operations as instructed by the supervisor, assuming that past acceptable ranges indicate current safety, and monitor the readings periodically. Option C. Conduct a quick visual inspection of the ventilation system, and if no obvious faults are found, resume normal operations based on the supervisor's assurance. Option D. Continue operations but instruct workers to wear personal respiratory protective equipment as a precautionary measure, without formally reporting the deviation. The correct answer is A. Immediately halt operations in the affected section and report the deviation to the Senior Safety Officer and the Directorate General of Mine Safety, DGMS, for assessment and guidance, while ensuring all workers are safely evacuated from the area. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving the interpretation and application of safety regulations within a mining environment. The core difficulty lies in balancing operational efficiency with the paramount importance of worker safety, especially when faced with conflicting information or interpretations of established guidelines. A junior engineer might feel pressured to prioritize production targets, potentially overlooking subtle but critical safety concerns. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all safety protocols are rigorously followed, even if it means a temporary slowdown in operations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the specific safety guidelines outlined in the Coal Mines Regulations, 1957, and any subsequent amendments or directives issued by the Directorate General of Mine Safety, DGMS. This includes understanding the technical specifications for ventilation systems, permissible dust levels, and emergency procedures. By consulting the relevant regulations and seeking clarification from senior safety officers or the DGMS if ambiguity exists, the engineer demonstrates adherence to the established legal framework governing mine safety. This proactive and compliant approach ensures that decisions are grounded in regulatory requirements, safeguarding worker health and preventing potential accidents, which is the bedrock of professional practice in the mining industry. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves relying solely on the immediate supervisor's verbal instruction without verifying it against the official safety regulations. This is a regulatory failure because it bypasses the established legal framework and relies on potentially incomplete or misinterpreted information. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility to ensure compliance with safety laws. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the operation based on past practices that may no longer be compliant with current regulations. This is a significant regulatory failure, as mining laws are subject to updates and revisions to address evolving safety knowledge and technologies. It also represents an ethical lapse by knowingly or unknowingly operating in a non-compliant manner, putting workers at risk. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the observed anomaly as insignificant without a proper risk assessment or consultation with safety personnel. This is a failure to adhere to the precautionary principle inherent in safety regulations. It is ethically unsound as it prioritizes expediency over the potential for harm, which is a direct contravention of the duty of care owed to employees. Professional reasoning. Professionals in the mining sector must adopt a systematic decision-making process that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the issue and its potential impact on safety. 2. Consulting the relevant legal and regulatory framework, e.g., Coal Mines Regulations, DGMS directives. 3. Seeking expert advice or clarification from designated safety officers or regulatory bodies if needed. 4. Documenting all assessments, decisions, and actions taken. 5. Implementing the safest course of action, even if it incurs temporary operational delays, ensuring that all decisions are justifiable under the law and ethical standards. Question 9. Process analysis reveals a new mining project proposal that promises significant cost savings through a novel extraction method. However, preliminary internal assessments suggest a potential for increased water contamination downstream, though the exact extent and impact are not definitively quantified. The project timeline is aggressive, and the immediate financial benefits are substantial. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound course of action for the project manager? Option A. Conduct a limited internal review of the water contamination potential, focusing only on aspects that can be easily mitigated without significant project alteration, to satisfy a minimal compliance check. Option B. Commission an independent, comprehensive environmental impact assessment to thoroughly evaluate the water contamination risks and propose mitigation strategies before proceeding, even if it delays the project and increases initial costs. Option C. Advocate for the immediate commencement of the project, emphasizing the cost savings and downplaying the speculative environmental concerns to meet the aggressive timeline. Option D. Proceed with the project as planned, relying on the internal assessments that indicate potential contamination, but are not definitive, with a commitment to address any issues that arise post-commencement. The correct answer is B. Commission an independent, comprehensive environmental impact assessment to thoroughly evaluate the water contamination risks and propose mitigation strategies before proceeding, even if it delays the project and increases initial costs. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate cost-saving pressures and long-term environmental responsibility. Common ethical dilemma in the mining industry. The decision requires balancing financial objectives with regulatory compliance and ethical stewardship, especially concerning potential environmental impacts. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to the Coal India Hiring Assessment Test's ethical guidelines and relevant environmental regulations. This involves a thorough, independent assessment of the environmental impact, even if it incurs additional costs. This represents best professional practice because it upholds the principles of integrity, accountability, and responsible resource management. It aligns with the spirit of environmental protection laws and the ethical imperative to prevent harm. By seeking an independent assessment, the professional demonstrates a commitment to objective truth and avoids potential conflicts of interest, ensuring decisions are based on sound data rather than expediency. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the environmental concerns due to cost. This fails to acknowledge the potential long-term liabilities and reputational damage associated with environmental negligence. It directly contravenes the ethical obligation to act with due diligence and may violate specific environmental protection laws that mandate impact assessments and mitigation strategies. Another incorrect approach would be to proceed with the project without a proper environmental impact assessment, assuming no significant harm will occur. This is a failure of due diligence and a disregard for regulatory requirements, potentially leading to unforeseen environmental damage and legal repercussions. Finally, attempting to downplay or conceal potential negative environmental findings to expedite the project would be a severe ethical breach, demonstrating a lack of integrity and a willingness to mislead stakeholders. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured decision-making process. First, identify the core ethical and regulatory issues. Second, gather all relevant information, including potential environmental impacts and associated costs. Third, consult applicable regulations and ethical codes of conduct. Fourth, evaluate all available options, considering their short-term and long-term consequences. Fifth, seek advice from senior colleagues or ethics committees if the situation is complex or ambiguous. Finally, make a decision that is defensible, transparent, and aligns with the highest ethical and regulatory standards, even if it is not the easiest or cheapest option. Question 10. Compliance review shows that a Coal India subsidiary in a remote region is facing significant pressure from local communities regarding its waste disposal practices, which are perceived as environmentally harmful. The subsidiary's management is proposing a cost-saving measure to temporarily divert waste into a nearby, less regulated stream to meet immediate production targets, arguing that full compliance with established Coal India environmental protocols would incur prohibitive costs and delay operations. Which of the following approaches best aligns with Coal India's regulatory framework and ethical obligations? Option A. Approve the subsidiary's proposed temporary waste diversion, with a commitment to address the issue more thoroughly once production targets are met and financial conditions improve. Option B. Delegate the decision-making authority entirely to the subsidiary's management, trusting their judgment on how to best balance local economic realities with environmental considerations. Option C. Instruct the subsidiary to conduct a superficial assessment of the environmental impact and implement minor adjustments to the waste disposal method that appear to address community concerns without full adherence to established protocols. Option D. Insist on strict adherence to Coal India's environmental policies and CSR guidelines for waste disposal, initiating a dialogue with the subsidiary and local communities to find a compliant and sustainable solution, even if it requires additional investment or temporary operational adjustments. The correct answer is D. Insist on strict adherence to Coal India's environmental policies and CSR guidelines for waste disposal, initiating a dialogue with the subsidiary and local communities to find a compliant and sustainable solution, even if it requires additional investment or temporary operational adjustments. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the immediate financial pressures of a subsidiary with the long-term strategic interests and ethical obligations of the parent company, Coal India. The subsidiary's management is focused on short-term gains, potentially at the expense of environmental compliance and community relations, which are critical for Coal India's reputation and sustainability. The challenge lies in ensuring that the subsidiary's actions align with Coal India's overarching corporate social responsibility, CSR, and environmental, social, and governance-esque commitments, even when faced with local economic pressures. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes the paramount importance of adhering to Coal India's established CSR and environmental policies, which are likely mandated by Indian environmental laws and regulations. This approach prioritizes long-term sustainability, regulatory compliance, and stakeholder trust over short-term financial expediency. By insisting on adherence to these policies, Coal India upholds its commitment to responsible mining practices, protects its brand reputation, and mitigates potential legal and social repercussions. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and the ethical imperative to operate sustainably. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing the subsidiary's immediate financial targets above all else. This fails to recognize that environmental and social compliance are not merely operational costs, but fundamental requirements for sustainable business. Such an approach risks significant regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and loss of social license to operate, ultimately undermining long-term profitability. It also violates the spirit and letter of environmental protection laws in India. Another incorrect approach is to defer the decision entirely to the subsidiary's management without clear guidance or oversight. This abdication of responsibility by the parent company can lead to inconsistent practices and a perception that Coal India is not serious about its environmental commitments. It fails to exercise due diligence and oversight, which are expected of a parent company. A third incorrect approach might be to seek a compromise that superficially addresses environmental concerns, but does not fully meet regulatory standards or community expectations. This tick box mentality can lead to ongoing issues and a lack of genuine commitment to sustainability, potentially resulting in future conflicts and legal challenges. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that integrates ethical considerations, regulatory compliance, and long-term strategic objectives. This involves 1. Understanding the relevant Indian environmental laws and Coal India's internal policies. 2. Assessing the potential risks and benefits of different courses of action, considering both financial and non-financial impacts, environmental, social, reputational. 3. Engaging with relevant stakeholders, including subsidiary management, environmental experts, and potentially community representatives, to gather information and build consensus. 4. Making a decision that upholds the company's values and legal obligations, even if it involves short-term financial trade-offs. Question 11. Consider a scenario where a mining operations manager at a Coal India subsidiary identifies a new blasting technique that promises significantly increased coal extraction efficiency. However, this technique involves a higher frequency of smaller blasts, which could potentially increase localized dust levels and noise pollution beyond the currently permitted limits, though the overall long-term environmental impact is not yet fully assessed. The manager is under pressure to meet quarterly production targets. What is the most appropriate course of action according to Indian regulatory frameworks governing mining and environmental protection? Option A. Inform the local community about the potential for increased dust and noise, and proceed with the new technique if they do not raise immediate objections, while continuing to monitor environmental parameters. Option B. Proceed with the new blasting technique, assuming that minor deviations in dust and noise levels are acceptable as long as overall production targets are met, and address any complaints reactively. Option C. Halt the implementation of the new technique and initiate a formal environmental impact assessment study, followed by seeking necessary approvals from the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and the Directorate General of Mine Safety before proceeding. Option D. Immediately implement the new blasting technique to meet production targets and inform the relevant environmental authorities about the change only if significant adverse impacts are observed or reported. The correct answer is D. Immediately implement the new blasting technique to meet production targets and inform the relevant environmental authorities about the change only if significant adverse impacts are observed or reported. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate operational needs and long-term environmental compliance, particularly within the context of Coal India's operations, which are subject to stringent environmental regulations in India. The need to maintain production levels can create pressure to overlook or minimize environmental concerns, demanding careful judgment to balance economic imperatives with legal and ethical responsibilities. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the Mines Act, 1952, and the Environment Protection Act, 1986, along with their associated rules and regulations in India. This involves a proactive and transparent engagement with regulatory bodies, seeking necessary approvals for any deviation or modification that might impact environmental standards. It demonstrates a commitment to sustainable mining practices and corporate social responsibility, which are increasingly important for long-term operational viability and public trust. This approach aligns with the principles of due diligence and responsible resource management mandated by Indian law. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the modified blasting technique without prior regulatory approval is a direct violation of the Environment Protection Act, 1986, and potentially the Mines Act, 1952, which govern environmental impact and safety in mining operations. This failure to seek necessary clearances constitutes a regulatory breach and can lead to severe penalties, including fines and operational shutdowns. Ethically, it represents a disregard for environmental stewardship and a potential risk to the surrounding ecosystem and community health. Another incorrect approach, which is to delay informing the authorities until a complaint is filed, is also professionally unacceptable. This passive stance suggests an attempt to conceal potential noncompliance or to avoid scrutiny. It undermines the spirit of regulatory oversight, which is designed to prevent harm proactively. Such a delay can exacerbate any negative environmental impact and lead to greater legal repercussions and reputational damage when the noncompliance is eventually discovered. It fails to demonstrate the transparency and accountability expected of a responsible mining entity. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the applicable Indian environmental and mining laws. When faced with a potential conflict between operational efficiency and regulatory compliance, the first step should always be to consult the relevant legal and environmental experts within the organization. This should be followed by a thorough assessment of the proposed operational changes' environmental impact. If the change deviates from established norms or requires specific permissions, the appropriate regulatory bodies, e.g., Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, State Pollution Control Boards, must be approached for consultation and approval before implementation. Maintaining open communication and documentation throughout this process is crucial for demonstrating good faith and ensuring compliance. Question 12. The investigation demonstrates that a critical piece of ventilation equipment in a deep underground coal mine has developed an intermittent fault, potentially affecting air quality in a section where a significant number of miners are working. The mine manager is under pressure to meet production targets for the quarter. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with safety regulations and protect worker well-being? Option A. Continue operations in the affected section, but instruct miners to be extra vigilant and report any discomfort, while scheduling a repair for the next scheduled maintenance day. Option B. Temporarily reroute airflow from another section to compensate, without formally assessing the impact of this diversion on the other section's ventilation. Option C. Immediately halt operations in the affected section, initiate a thorough investigation into the fault with the safety officer, and implement temporary safety measures while a permanent repair is undertaken, ensuring all actions are documented. Option D. Implement a minor adjustment to the equipment based on a quick visual inspection and allow operations to continue, assuming the fault is insignificant. The correct answer is C. Immediately halt operations in the affected section, initiate a thorough investigation into the fault with the safety officer, and implement temporary safety measures while a permanent repair is undertaken, ensuring all actions are documented. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to the interpretation and application of safety regulations within a mining environment. The core difficulty lies in balancing the immediate need for operational continuity with the paramount requirement of ensuring worker safety and compliance with the Coal Mines Safety and Health Act, 1952, and its associated regulations. A hasty decision without thorough assessment could lead to severe accidents, regulatory penalties, and reputational damage. The pressure to meet production targets can create a conflict of interest, demanding a robust decision-making process grounded in safety principles. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented assessment of the identified hazard, considering its potential impact on safety and operations. This includes consulting relevant safety manuals, seeking expert opinion from the safety officer, and implementing temporary control measures while a permanent solution is developed. This aligns with the proactive safety culture mandated by the Coal Mines Safety and Health Act, 1952, which emphasizes hazard identification, risk assessment, and the implementation of control measures to prevent accidents. The Act places a strong onus on management to ensure a safe working environment, and this approach demonstrates adherence to that responsibility by prioritizing safety over immediate production demands. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding with operations without a thorough assessment of the identified hazard is a direct violation of the duty of care owed to workers under the Coal Mines Safety and Health Act, 1952. This approach disregards the potential for immediate danger and prioritizes production, which is ethically and legally unacceptable. Demonstrates a failure to conduct a proper risk assessment, a fundamental requirement for safe mining operations. Implementing a quick fix without consulting the safety officer or referring to established safety protocols is also a failure. The safety officer's role is crucial in interpreting and enforcing safety regulations. Bypassing this expertise undermines the regulatory framework and increases the likelihood of an inadequate or unsafe solution. This approach neglects the collaborative and expert-driven nature of safety management in the mining industry. Ignoring the hazard altogether and hoping it resolves itself is the most egregious failure. This demonstrates a complete disregard for worker safety and regulatory compliance. It is a dereliction of duty that could have catastrophic consequences and would be met with severe penalties under the Coal Mines Safety and Health Act, 1952, including potential prosecution. Professional reasoning. Professionals in the mining sector must adopt a hierarchical approach to decision-making when faced with safety concerns. The primary consideration must always be the safety and health of personnel. This involves a structured process. First, identify the hazard. Second, assess the risk associated with the hazard. Third, consult with relevant safety personnel and refer to established procedures and regulations. Fourth, implement appropriate control measures, prioritizing elimination or substitution of the hazard, followed by engineering controls, administrative controls, and finally, personal protective equipment. And fifth, monitor the effectiveness of the implemented controls. This systematic approach ensures compliance with legal obligations and fosters a culture of safety, mitigating risks and preventing accidents. Question 13. Upon reviewing the implications of a newly introduced environmental regulation impacting coal extraction processes, what is the most prudent approach for Coal India's management to undertake for a comprehensive risk assessment? Option A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment involving cross-functional teams, expert consultations, and a review of both historical data and the specific nuances of the new regulation to develop targeted mitigation strategies. Option B. Delegate the entire risk assessment process to the legal department, expecting them to identify all operational and safety risks without input from other departments. Option C. Rely solely on anecdotal evidence from site supervisors regarding potential operational disruptions caused by the new regulation. Option D. Primarily focus on the immediate cost implications of compliance, assuming that historical operational data is sufficient to predict all potential risks. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment involving cross-functional teams, expert consultations, and a review of both historical data and the specific nuances of the new regulation to develop targeted mitigation strategies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a challenge in risk assessment due to the inherent uncertainties in predicting the impact of a new regulatory change on operational efficiency and safety protocols within Coal India. The pressure to maintain production targets while ensuring compliance requires a nuanced understanding of potential risks, both immediate and long-term. A superficial assessment could lead to inadequate mitigation strategies, potentially resulting in safety incidents, environmental noncompliance, or significant financial penalties, all of which are critical concerns for a public sector undertaking like Coal India. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that integrates expert judgment from various departments, operations, safety, legal, environmental, with available data on similar regulatory changes in the past, both within Coal India and the broader Indian mining sector. This approach aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance, mandated by Indian law and Coal India's internal guidelines. It emphasizes a proactive identification of potential risks, a qualitative and quantitative evaluation of their likelihood and impact, and the development of specific, actionable mitigation plans. This systematic process ensures that all significant risks are considered, prioritized, and addressed, thereby safeguarding operational continuity, employee safety, and environmental protection, which are paramount objectives for Coal India. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to solely rely on historical data without considering the unique aspects of the new regulation. This fails to acknowledge that past scenarios may not perfectly mirror the current situation, leading to an underestimation or overestimation of risks. This approach risks violating the spirit of regulatory compliance by not adequately preparing for novel challenges. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize immediate cost savings over thorough risk assessment. This is a direct contravention of the Coal Mines Regulations and the Mines Act, which place paramount importance on safety and environmental protection. Such a focus can lead to cutting corners on essential safety measures or environmental controls, increasing the likelihood of severe incidents and regulatory penalties. A third incorrect approach would be to delegate the entire risk assessment to a single department without cross-functional input. This can lead to a myopic view of risks, missing critical interdependencies between operational, safety, and environmental factors. It also fails to leverage the diverse expertise available within Coal India, potentially resulting in an incomplete or inaccurate risk profile, which is a failure in due diligence and responsible management. Professional reasoning. Professionals in such situations should adopt a structured risk management framework. This involves 1. Risk identification, brainstorming potential risks associated with the regulatory change across all relevant areas. 2. Risk analysis, evaluating the likelihood and impact of identified risks, using both qualitative and quantitative methods where appropriate. 3. Risk evaluation, prioritizing risks based on their severity and the organization's risk appetite. 4. Risk treatment, developing and implementing strategies to mitigate, transfer, avoid, or accept risks. 5. Risk monitoring and review, continuously tracking the effectiveness of mitigation strategies and updating the risk assessment as new information becomes available. This iterative process, grounded in regulatory requirements and ethical considerations, ensures robust risk management. Question 14. The control framework reveals a discrepancy between the projected economic benefits of a new mining project and the preliminary environmental impact assessment, which indicates potential risks to local water sources. As a project manager at Coal India, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure responsible decision-making and compliance with regulatory guidelines? Option A. Proceed with the project as planned, assuming that the economic benefits outweigh the potential environmental risks and that mitigation measures can be addressed later. Option B. Delegate the decision-making authority to a lower-level team to expedite the process, as the project is critical for meeting production targets. Option C. Commission a detailed, independent environmental impact assessment (IA) to thoroughly evaluate the risks, explore all feasible mitigation measures, and ensure compliance with relevant Indian environmental laws and Coal India's sustainability policies before making a final decision. Option D. Halt the project immediately due to the identified environmental risks, without further investigation or consideration of mitigation strategies. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the project as planned, assuming that the economic benefits outweigh the potential environmental risks and that mitigation measures can be addressed later. Explanation. The control framework reveals a situation where a new mining project proposal, while promising significant economic benefits for Coal India and the local community, has potential environmental impacts that are not fully addressed in the initial assessment. This scenario is professionally challenging because it pits immediate economic gains against long-term environmental sustainability and regulatory compliance. A careful judgment is required to balance these competing interests, ensuring that the decision-making process is robust, transparent, and adheres strictly to the Coal India Hiring Assessment Test's regulatory framework, which would likely align with Indian environmental laws and company policies. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive, data-driven, and ethically sound decision-making process. This involves seeking expert environmental impact assessments, engaging with stakeholders, and ensuring that all proposed mitigation measures are not only technically feasible, but also financially viable and legally compliant with Indian environmental regulations. This approach demonstrates a commitment to responsible mining, long-term sustainability, and adherence to the principles of good corporate governance, which are implicitly tested in a hiring assessment. An incorrect approach that overlooks or downplays the environmental concerns would be professionally unacceptable. This would constitute a failure to comply with environmental protection laws and regulations, potentially leading to legal penalties, reputational damage, and long-term ecological harm. Another incorrect approach might be to prioritize immediate economic benefits without adequate consideration of potential risks, which is a failure of due diligence and risk management. This could also lead to non-compliance with regulatory requirements for environmental impact mitigation. A third incorrect approach could be to rely solely on internal assessments without independent verification, which undermines the integrity of the decision-making process and may not meet the standards of regulatory scrutiny. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that involves 1. Thorough information gathering, including independent environmental impact assessments. 2. Risk identification and mitigation planning. 3. Stakeholder consultation. 4. Evaluation of alternatives. 5. Adherence to all applicable laws and regulations. And 6. Documentation of the entire process for transparency and accountability. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with both business objectives and ethical responsibilities. Question 15. Examination of the data shows that a critical piece of mining equipment has been flagged for a potential safety issue by an operator who verbally assures the shift supervisor that it is still operational and safe to use based on their experience. The supervisor is under pressure to meet production targets for the day. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Halt operations involving the equipment until a formal safety inspection is conducted by a certified safety officer and all findings are documented and approved. Option B. Proceed with the operation based on the operator's verbal assurance, as their experience is considered reliable. Option C. Ask the operator to perform a quick, informal check themselves and then proceed if they deem it safe. Option D. Immediately suspend all operations in the area until the issue can be thoroughly investigated, even if it means missing production targets. The correct answer is A. Halt operations involving the equipment until a formal safety inspection is conducted by a certified safety officer and all findings are documented and approved. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving the interpretation and application of safety regulations within a mining environment. The core difficulty lies in balancing operational efficiency with the absolute imperative of worker safety, especially when faced with potentially ambiguous or conflicting information regarding equipment status. A hasty decision could lead to severe safety breaches, regulatory noncompliance, and potential harm to personnel. Careful judgment is required to ensure all safety protocols are rigorously followed before any operational decision is made. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a systematic and documented process for addressing safety concerns. It aligns with the principles of due diligence and the proactive safety culture mandated by mining regulations. By initiating a formal investigation and ensuring all safety checks are completed and verified by competent personnel, this approach upholds the highest standards of worker protection. This is best professional practice because it directly addresses potential hazards, ensures compliance with the Mines Act and associated rules, and establishes a clear audit trail for safety management. It prioritizes the well-being of workers above immediate production targets, which is a fundamental ethical and regulatory obligation. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with operations based on a verbal assurance without documented verification. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses established safety protocols, demonstrating a disregard for the Mines Act and its emphasis on written records and formal approvals for operational changes or the use of potentially compromised equipment. This approach creates a high risk of accidents and leaves the company vulnerable to severe penalties for non-compliance. Another incorrect approach is to postpone the operation indefinitely without a clear plan for resolution. While seemingly cautious, this can be professionally detrimental if it lacks a structured approach to identifying and rectifying the issue. It may indicate a failure to adequately resource safety investigations or a lack of proactive problem solving, which can indirectly impact operational efficiency and employee morale without a clear justification for the delay. This approach might not directly violate a specific rule, but represents poor professional management of safety-related operational impediments. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the operator's experience without formal safety clearance. While experienced operators are valuable, their judgment must be supplemented by adherence to established safety procedures and official sign-offs. This approach constitutes a regulatory failure, as it undermines the hierarchical safety management system and the requirement for independent verification of safety status, as stipulated by safety regulations. It introduces an unacceptable level of subjective risk into operational decisions. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this context should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the potential hazard or safety concern. 2. Consulting relevant regulations and internal safety policies. 3. Initiating a formal investigation or verification process involving competent personnel. 4. Documenting all findings and decisions. 5. Obtaining necessary approvals before proceeding with any operation. 6. Communicating safety status clearly to all affected parties. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and most importantly, safe. Question 16. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of potential risks. Coal India is considering a new mining project, but initial geological surveys have revealed significant uncertainties regarding ore body characteristics and potential subsurface hazards. Given these data gaps, what is the most prudent approach to risk assessment and project progression? Option A. Commission a rapid, low-cost geological survey to gather minimal data quickly, allowing the project to commence without significant delay. Option B. Conduct a phased risk assessment, initiating detailed geological investigations and risk mitigation strategies incrementally as the project moves through its development stages. Option C. Proceed with the project based on the initial optimistic projections, assuming the uncertainties will resolve favorably during excavation. Option D. Postpone the project indefinitely until a complete and perfect geological dataset is available, regardless of market conditions or project timelines. The correct answer is B. Conduct a phased risk assessment, initiating detailed geological investigations and risk mitigation strategies incrementally as the project moves through its development stages. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in risk assessment by requiring a decision on how to proceed with a new mining project given incomplete geological data. The challenge lies in balancing the potential economic benefits of the project against the inherent uncertainties and potential environmental and safety risks. A hasty decision based on insufficient data could lead to significant financial losses, regulatory noncompliance, or severe safety incidents, all of which are critical concerns for Coal India. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the risk assessment is robust, transparent, and aligned with the company's commitment to responsible mining practices and regulatory adherence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a phased risk assessment, starting with a preliminary evaluation based on available data, and then proceeding to more detailed investigations as the project progresses. This aligns with best professional practice and regulatory expectations for large-scale projects, specifically under the framework governing Coal India's operation, which emphasizes due diligence and adherence to environmental and safety regulations, such as those potentially derived from the Mines Act, 1952, and relevant environmental protection guidelines. A phased approach allows for informed decision-making at each stage. It ensures that significant risks are identified and mitigated progressively, rather than attempting to address all uncertainties upfront with limited information. This method is ethically sound, as it prioritizes safety and environmental stewardship, while still pursuing economic viability in a structured and responsible manner. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding with the project without further geological investigation, relying solely on the initial optimistic projections, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach disregards the fundamental principle of risk management, which mandates thorough data gathering before committing substantial resources. It could lead to non-compliance with environmental impact assessment requirements and safety regulation, potentially resulting in fines, project suspension, or even catastrophic accidents. Another incorrect approach would be to indefinitely postpone the project due to the data gaps. While caution is necessary, an indefinite delay without a clear plan for data acquisition or risk mitigation can be professionally unsound. It fails to capitalize on potential economic opportunities and may not be justifiable if the identified risks, once better understood, are manageable. This approach might also be seen as a failure to adequately plan and execute strategic initiatives, which is a core responsibility. Finally, commissioning a superficial and rushed geological survey to quickly obtain some data, without ensuring its quality or comprehensiveness, is also a flawed strategy. This approach attempts to circumvent the rigorous data requirements without genuinely addressing the underlying risks. It is ethically questionable, as it creates a false sense of security and could lead to decisions based on misleading information, thereby failing to meet regulatory standards for risk assessment and project planning. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, clearly define the scope of the project and the potential risks associated with incomplete data. Second, identify all relevant regulatory requirements for geological surveys, environmental impact assessments, and safety protocols specific to Coal India's operational jurisdiction. Third, evaluate the available data against these requirements to pinpoint critical knowledge gaps. Fourth, develop a phased plan for data acquisition and risk mitigation, prioritizing the most significant uncertainties. Fifth, establish clear decision points at each phase, allowing for go/no-go decisions based on updated risk assessments and regulatory compliance. This iterative process ensures that decisions are data-driven, compliant, and ethically responsible, safeguarding both the company and its stakeholders. Question 17. Analysis of a proposed new coal mining project in a region with known groundwater vulnerability. What is the most robust approach to risk assessment for potential environmental impacts, considering the regulatory framework of India? Option A. Focus primarily on immediate operational risks like equipment failure and worker safety, as these are the most direct and quantifiable risks. Option B. Conduct a basic risk assessment based on readily available public information without site-specific investigations. Option C. Prioritize identifying potential long-term environmental impacts such as groundwater contamination and subsidence, and integrate mitigation strategies from the initial planning stages, supported by comprehensive geological surveys and environmental impact assessments. Option D. Rely on historical data from similar mines in different geological settings to estimate potential environmental risks. The correct answer is C. Prioritize identifying potential long-term environmental impacts such as groundwater contamination and subsidence, and integrate mitigation strategies from the initial planning stages, supported by comprehensive geological surveys and environmental impact assessments. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in risk assessment within the mining sector, specifically concerning the identification and evaluation of potential environmental hazards associated with coal mining operations in India. The professional challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency and economic viability with the imperative to protect the environment and comply with stringent regulatory frameworks. A thorough risk assessment requires not just identifying potential hazards, but also understanding their likelihood and potential impact, and then developing appropriate mitigation strategies. The correct approach emphasizes a systematic, data-driven, and forward-looking methodology. It involves a comprehensive review of historical data, geological surveys, operational procedures, and regulatory requirements. This approach aligns with the principles of responsible mining and environmental stewardship mandated by Indian environmental laws and mining regulations. By prioritizing the identification of potential long-term environmental impacts and integrating mitigation measures early in the planning phase. This approach ensures compliance, minimizes future liabilities, and promotes sustainable operations. It reflects best professional practice by adopting a proactive stance rather than a reactive one. Incorrect approaches fail to meet the required standards of diligence and compliance. One incorrect approach might focus solely on immediate operational risks, neglecting potential long-term environmental consequences. This would be a failure to comply with the precautionary principle often embedded in environmental regulations, which requires anticipating and preventing harm, even in the absence of full scientific certainty. Another incorrect approach might rely on anecdotal evidence or outdated information, disregarding the need for current, site-specific data and expert analysis. This would violate the principle of due diligence and could lead to inadequate risk mitigation, potentially resulting in environmental damage and regulatory penalties. A third incorrect approach might overlook the importance of stakeholder consultation, failing to consider the perspectives of local communities and regulatory bodies, which is often a requirement for comprehensive risk assessment and can lead to social and legal challenges. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the scope and objectives of the risk assessment. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders, understanding the applicable regulatory landscape, e.g., the Mines Act, 1952, and environmental protection laws in India, and gathering comprehensive data. The process should then move to hazard identification, risk analysis, likelihood and impact, risk evaluation, and the development of a risk treatment plan. Regular review and monitoring of the identified risks and implemented controls are crucial for ensuring ongoing effectiveness and compliance. Question 18. The control framework reveals a significant opportunity to streamline the coal extraction process, potentially reducing operational cycle times by 15%. However, the proposed optimization involves altering the sequence of certain safety checks and reducing the frequency of specific equipment inspections. The management team is eager to implement these changes quickly to meet production targets. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical considerations for process optimization in this context? Option A. Implement the changes incrementally, focusing first on the aspects that offer the most significant time savings and deferring the evaluation of safety impacts to a later stage. Option B. Immediately implement the proposed changes to achieve the 15% cycle time reduction, with a plan to address any safety concerns that may arise post-implementation. Option C. Proceed with the optimization based on the projected efficiency gains, assuming that existing safety measures are sufficient and will not be compromised by the altered sequence of checks. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment involving the safety department and operational teams to evaluate the impact of proposed changes on safety protocols and regulatory compliance before any implementation. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment involving the safety department and operational teams to evaluate the impact of proposed changes on safety protocols and regulatory compliance before any implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between achieving efficiency gains through process optimization and maintaining the integrity of safety protocols, which are paramount in the mining industry. The need to balance speed with thoroughness, especially when dealing with potentially hazardous operations, requires careful judgment and a deep understanding of both operational realities and regulatory mandates. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, data-driven, and collaborative methodology for process optimization. This involves engaging all relevant stakeholders, including operational staff who possess on-the-ground knowledge, and critically, the safety department to ensure that any proposed changes do not compromise established safety standards. Adherence to the Coal Mines Safety and Health Act and relevant Coal India guidelines is non-negotiable. This approach ensures that optimization efforts are not only effective in improving efficiency, but also compliant with legal requirements and ethically sound, safeguarding the well-being of workers and the environment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without a comprehensive safety impact assessment would represent a significant regulatory failure. Specifically, it would violate the spirit and letter of the Coal Mines Safety and Health Act, which mandates that all operational changes must undergo rigorous safety evaluation. Furthermore, Bypassing the safety department's review process is an ethical lapse, demonstrating a disregard for worker safety and a failure to uphold professional responsibility. Another incorrect approach that implements changes based on anecdotal evidence or without proper pilot testing risks introducing unforeseen operational disruptions or safety hazards, which is contrary to the principles of responsible process management and could lead to non-compliance with operational guidelines. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the objectives, followed by a thorough risk assessment that includes potential safety implications. This should be coupled with stakeholder engagement, data collection and analysis, and a phased implementation plan with continuous monitoring and evaluation. When considering process optimization, the primary filter must always be safety and regulatory compliance, with efficiency gains being a secondary consideration that must be achieved within these constraints. Question 19. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of operational disruption due to potential equipment failure in a critical mining section. The immediate pressure is to meet quarterly production targets. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Proceed with scheduled maintenance for the critical equipment, even if it temporarily impacts production, and communicate the revised production forecast to stakeholders. Option B. Conduct only a cursory inspection of the equipment to confirm it is functioning, and postpone the full maintenance until after the production targets are met. Option C. Continue operations as planned, relying on the equipment's current performance, and schedule maintenance for a later, less critical period. Option D. Immediately halt operations in that section and await further instructions from senior management regarding production adjustments. The correct answer is A. Proceed with scheduled maintenance for the critical equipment, even if it temporarily impacts production, and communicate the revised production forecast to stakeholders. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of operational disruption due to potential equipment failure in a critical mining section. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate production targets with long-term safety and compliance. A hasty decision to defer maintenance to meet short-term output goals, despite the identified high risk, could lead to severe consequences, including accidents, environmental damage, and significant financial penalties under the coal mines regulations. The correct approach involves prioritizing the scheduled maintenance and potentially adjusting production targets or reallocating resources to mitigate the impact of the downtime. This aligns with the overarching principle of safety first, which is paramount in mining operations and is reinforced by regulatory frameworks like the coal mines regulations. Proactive maintenance, even if it causes temporary disruption, is a demonstration of responsible operational management and adherence to safety standards, thereby preventing potential breaches of regulatory requirements related to safe working conditions and equipment integrity. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the high-risk assessment and continue operations without addressing the potential equipment failure. This demonstrates a failure to comply with the spirit and letter of the coal mines regulations, which mandate the maintenance of safe and sound mining equipment. Another incorrect approach would be to perform only superficial checks, falsely believing this mitigates the risk. This constitutes a misrepresentation of due diligence and a potential violation of reporting and inspection requirements. A third incorrect approach would be to postpone the maintenance indefinitely, citing production pressures, without a robust risk mitigation plan or formal approval for deviation, which directly contravenes the proactive risk management expected under mining safety legislation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the identified risks and their potential impact. This involves consulting relevant regulations, assessing the feasibility of various mitigation strategies, including temporary production adjustments, and documenting all decisions and justifications. When faced with conflicting priorities, the framework should prioritize safety and regulatory compliance, seeking expert advice and escalating concerns if necessary to ensure responsible operational management. Question 20. Research into a proposed cost-saving measure for a mining operation within Coal India suggests replacing a currently mandated but more expensive dust suppression system with a cheaper alternative. The proposal highlights significant immediate financial benefits. What is the most professionally responsible approach to evaluating this proposal, considering the regulatory framework governing Coal India's operations? Option A. Proceed with the new system after a brief review of its technical specifications. assuming it meets general industry standards without specific verification against Indian mining regulations. Option B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment involving safety and environmental experts to evaluate the efficacy and compliance of the proposed alternative system with the coal mines regulations, 1957, and relevant environmental laws. Before any decision is made, Option C. Implement the new dust suppression system immediately to realize the cost savings, as the proposal comes from a senior manager known for financial acumen. Option D. Rely on the opinion of the site supervisor, who believes the current system is overly cautious and the cheaper alternative will suffice for dust control. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment involving safety and environmental experts to evaluate the efficacy and compliance of the proposed alternative system with the coal mines regulations, 1957, and relevant environmental laws before any decision is made. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate cost-saving pressures and the long-term imperative of ensuring operational safety and environmental compliance within Coal India's regulatory framework. The decision-maker must balance financial prudence with the absolute priority of adhering to safety standards and environmental protection laws, which are non-negotiable under Indian mining regulations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, data-driven assessment of the proposed cost-saving measures, impact on safety, and environmental compliance. This aligns with the Coal Mines Regulations, 1957, and the Mines Act, 1952, which mandate stringent safety protocols and environmental safeguards. By seeking expert consultation and conducting a comprehensive risk assessment, the decision-maker demonstrates due diligence, a core ethical and legal requirement. This proactive stance ensures that any proposed changes do not inadvertently compromise worker safety or lead to environmental degradation, thereby upholding Coal India's commitment to responsible mining operations and avoiding potential legal repercussions and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate financial savings without adequate safety and environmental review fails to acknowledge the paramount importance of regulatory compliance. This oversight constitutes a direct violation of the Mines Act, 1952, which places a legal obligation on mine management to ensure the safety and health of all persons employed in the mine. Furthermore, it disregards the environmental protection mandates under the Environment Protection Act, 1986, and associated rules, which govern mining activities to prevent pollution and ecological damage. Such a decision would be ethically unsound, prioritizing profit over people and the environment, and would expose Coal India to significant penalties, legal liabilities, and a severe blow to its public image. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing the cost-saving measure based on anecdotal evidence or the opinion of a single, unqualified individual is equally problematic. This bypasses the established procedures for evaluating operational changes and ignores the need for expert technical and environmental assessment. It violates the principles of sound management and risk assessment, which are implicitly required by regulatory bodies to ensure that decisions are informed and justifiable. This approach risks overlooking critical safety hazards or environmental impacts that only a qualified professional or a systematic evaluation would identify, leading to potential accidents or non-compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the proposed change and its intended benefits, e.g., cost saving. 2. Assess the potential risks associated with the change, specifically concerning safety, health, and environmental impact, referencing relevant Indian regulations. 3. Consult with relevant internal departments, e.g., safety, environment, engineering, and if necessary, external experts. 4. Conduct a formal risk assessment and impact study. 5. Evaluate the findings against regulatory requirements and best practices. 6. Make a decision based on a comprehensive understanding of the risks and compliance obligations, prioritizing safety and environmental protection. 7. Document the entire process and the rationale for the final decision.